After reviewing all of the Dragon Nest movies, I've decided to continue my quest to review all of the Dragon Nest animated media. So, the next thing on my radar was, of course, the Dragon Nest anime. And before any of you say, actually, you can't call it anime because it was made in China and not Japan, I will still call it anime because I couldn't pretend to care less about semantics. I actually remember watching this anime on my tablet all the way when the first episode just came out, back when I was 14 years old. That is all I remember though. It was the only episode I watched, and shortly after that I lost interest in the game. Well, until I came back as an adult. Anyway, since I'm picking this anime back up over 9 years later, the first thing I went out to do was to try and watch it again. That's when I found out that when you try to look up Dragon Nest anime, the top result will violate you with my mortal enemy. Nonetheless, after some extra digging, I did manage to find the re-upload of the first episode on YouTube. And that is indeed cool, but why only the first episode? I clearly remember that there was supposed to be 12 of them. This website certainly confirms I didn't pull this information out of thin air, so where are the rest? I've looked everywhere I could, but no matter where I went, the only thing I could find was this one episode. I even went to the official website of one of the animation studios involved in the project, and the place they linked also only had the first episode. Talking about Seven Stone, I absolutely have to show you the poster that they made for this. First, let's look at all the other posters they have to represent the games they worked with. And now let's take a look at the Dragon Nest anime poster. Bruh, which intern was paid 5 pennies to make this in Photoshop 10 minutes before the deadline? Why didn't they just use, the actual poster that was made for this anime? Alright, let's get back on track. I must admit that I actually did manage to find another episode after a while. The second one, which follows the interactions between Iver and Guy, taking place in the main quest extra chapter 5. And you might think, wait, why did they go from Legendia all the way to Mistland in the span of 2 episodes? Because this is exactly what I thought too. Actually, I must admit that for the longest time, I thought that these 2 episodes were from 2 completely different series. That is why when seeing Dragon Nest episode 2, I've been confused as to where the first episode was. Silly me! How could I possibly deduce that these 2 completely unrelated plots went one after another? So, does that mean that the anime wasn't supposed to be just retelling of the events from the game's main quest in chronological order, but instead each episode dives into more details about the notable events from the main story that stayed behind the scenes of the quests? I have a hunch that at some point the idea for the anime's plot switched from the first option to the second for some reason. And even if it did, seeing the behind the scenes of certain quests would be a pretty sick idea. So, where are the rest of the 10 promised episodes? After coming up empty-handed, I began thinking if these 12 episodes even existed. Because this situation was starting to remind me of the Dragon Nest movie trilogy. As I've mentioned in my previous video, there was actually supposed to be 3 movies, but the third one never came out. So, could the same situation have happened again? With nowhere else to go, I decided to ask around the community and made a tweet wondering if anyone knew the details. And that is where my suspicions were confirmed. So basically, here's the situation. The first episode of the anime came out on August 20th, 2015. The events of which are set in Legendia. According to this article about the conference of June 30th, where the reveal of the anime happened, it was supposed to be a sort of celebration for the 5th anniversary of the game. What's interesting is that according to the same article, the animation was supposed to feature all playable characters at the time, including Makina, Shian, Triana, Angelica, Eden, Camelina, Ren and Charlotte. And yes, this article forgot to mention Callie. Sorry to all the Callie stans watching this. But if you watched the first episode, you already know that only a handful of these characters actually appear in the anime. This might confirm the fact that more episodes were planned but never released. Another factor confirming this theory is the aforementioned second episode, but we'll get to that in due time. However, out of the entire playable cast, Makina's presence is the most revealing. At the time, she was the newest available class, as she was released 17th of June 2015 on the Korean server, so in other words, 13 days before the conference. So if we're going to be generous and say that the work on the anime started around the same day as Makina came out, this would mean that it took them approximately 2 months to make this one episode. And yeah, considering that this episode is only 10 minutes long, this seems like a pretty reasonable amount of time. But why does that fact matter? Well, it does, because you'd think that at these rates the next episode would be ready relatively soon, but no. The first Interlude came out only on April 7th of 2016, almost 8 months after the first one. And not only that, the events now take place in Mistland for some reason. Remember how I said that I thought this was a completely different series now? Well, I certainly can't blame myself for thinking that, because literally everyone involved is also treating the second episode as a completely unrelated thing. Seven Stone Studios links only to the first episode. This official page for the anime only features characters from the first episode. And if you try to look up Dragon Nest anime, I guarantee that the first relevant thing you'll find is once again the first episode. And after we suddenly jumped all the way to Mistland, there were no more episodes following it, and the anime was completely forgotten, both by the community and those involved with the production. So naturally, my question is, what happened to it? Well, that's the fun part. Nobody knows. Yeah, at least with the Throne of Elves incident, we knew that the plug was pulled because of the copyright contract between Mille Pictures and Shanda Games. But this time, I found jack shit. They made 2 completely disconnected episodes and then the anime just stopped. I tried to find any articles which could possibly shed any light as to what happened to the project. But there was absolutely nothing. Nada. I scoured the Chinese news so much that I kid you not, this popped up in my YouTube recommended tab. I also got this comment from an actual Chinese player on one of my tweets. And besides corroborating the information about the movies I've previously discussed, they also confirmed that nobody knows the exact reason as to what happened to this anime. So unfortunately, I doubt we will ever solve the mystery of what truly happened to the Dragon Nest anime. The only things left for me to discuss are, of course, the 2 episodes that we do have. I have to tell you that initially my plan for this video was to review the entire Legendian series, and then look at the Mistland episode separately. But since there is no actual series for me to watch, I'll combine these 2 into the current video, so rejoice, you'll get twice the yapping from me. That said, let's begin with the first episode.
That's why your shoes raggedy.
That's why your mama dead. Dead as hell. What shoes she got on? What shoes she had on her casket?
Before I will get to talking about the episode in question, I'll start by going over this interview with the members of one of the companies involved with the anime, Beidou Penguin Studio. And if you're wondering why the dubbing company is the one answering this question instead of the animation on director's team, I have absolutely no idea. According to this interview, the anime's main story was supposed to be as close as possible to the events of the game's main quest. And unlike another Dragon Nest media, the anime wasn't going to be set in an alternative universe, but in the same one as the game itself. As it turns out, they even planned to include some side quest content, but as we all know, that never happened. And yeah, as you can already see, this is just even more proof that this episode wasn't supposed to be a one-off, which becomes even more obvious if you actually watch it. The episode starts with the backstory about the creation of Thera. And okay, I'm not gonna harp on it too much, but why does literally every Dragon Nest cartoon have to start with the exposition drop? Anyway, the mandatory backstory monologue doesn't tell you anything you wouldn't already know if you were a fan of the game. I'm also not gonna spend my time recapping it because all this information is actually irrelevant to the rest of the episode. But I won't bash them for adding this exposition since I'll assume that it would have become relevant at a later point if the rest of the episode did actually come out.
印度而堕落的古代人召唤了黑龙，让整个世界陷入危机。50年前，一名闪耀着金色光辉的剑士。
Now, I have to warn you that whatever faults I'm about to point out could have happened because of a mistranslation, since, believe it or not, I can't understand a word of Chinese. That said, this recollection makes it seem like the Black Dragon defeated by the 6 heroes was the same dragon that corrupted the Ancients, when in fact the Ancients were dealing with the Beyond Dragon, and the Black Dragon wasn't even a thing at the time. So the claims of this anime being canon are already being questioned, and we're barely a minute in. After the government-mandated Dragon Nest exposition is over, we cut over to Machina's starter cutscene. It's mostly the same as in the actual game, with an addition of few extra scenes which explain Machina's lore. And if you were wondering, no, we do not find out how she managed to survive the fall, but she did. And frankly, I'm too lazy to play through the entire Machina story quest again, just to see if it's ever explained or not. So I'll say that cats have 9 lives or something like that. We then cut over to what I think is supposed to be the warrior or archer starter cutscene. I say supposed to be because it's actually rather different to what happens in the game. In-game, Rose and Lily are running away from a group of monsters before Rose gets kidnapped and the player has to defend Lily from the goblins. But here the place of Lily is taken by Timothy, and instead of getting kidnapped, Rose is saved by Sharon and Triana. Yeah, I think that by this point it's clear that the goal of being as close as possible to the game was not reached. But to be honest, I didn't really expect them to achieve it in the first place. I think some creative liberties had to be taken, otherwise it would be impossible to not only combine the story of every playable character, but also fit all of it in the span of only 12 episodes. So my position is this: as long as none of the key story points contradict the game's lore, I'm totally down with whatever is going on. I think that's a pretty fair thing to ask. Will they deliver though? Well, let's see. The other remaining orc runs away in fear while Rose and Timothy thank the heroes for saving them. Rose invites the two to stay the night at her house, to which they agree. Meanwhile, we find out that the orcs were actually ordered to capture Rose by a red harpy, who was in turn sent by Elena. And yes, this is now the 3rd Dragon Nest animation where Elena becomes relevant. We also find out that Machina works for Elena too, which actually does happen in the game as well. Except that would mean that she's got much farther than Sharon and Triana, since the two of them are still in Prairie Town, while Machina is already in Keldrock according to the game's progression. Another interesting thing I should mention is that this anime is the only place where we ever find out Machina's name, it apparently being Shilonai, which is how I will refer to her from now on. I'm not sure how canon it actually is, since it wasn't even mentioned in the official Dragon Nest lore book, or anywhere in the game itself for that matter. So if anyone can answer this question, feel free to hit up the comments. We then cut over to Rose's house, where her and her fam reward the two heroes with a big meal. While Lily and Rose leave to do the dishes, Mayor Harold gives us an exposition drop about Rose's backstory.
那天有个全身是伤的女性，抱着一个女婴来到了村里。
10年前，难道是凯德拉围城战？
又把魔物引到离村子很远的地方。
Now, Rose and Himara did indeed move to Prairie Town, because Rose was being targeted as the prophet. The part where Himara threw herself off the cliff to save her daughter is also true. However, the rest of the story makes absolutely zero sense. First of all, this retelling of events implies that the reason Rose's mother brought her to Prairie Town was because of the siege of Keldrock. But actually, the siege of Keldrock happened only years after Clara's death. And think about it. In the anime, it's stated that this event happened 10 years ago, and portrays Rose as being a baby at the time. And it is indeed canon that the siege of Keldrock takes place 10 years before the main quest. However, if we were to believe the anime's retelling of events, that would mean Rose is currently 10 years old. And I don't know about you, but she certainly don't look 10 years old to me. I sure fucking hope she isn't, otherwise Timothy is gonna have a lot of questions to answer.
Well, I was actually coming out here to pick up a cupcake.
I honestly have no idea how they managed to completely butcher that plot point. The only way I could possibly explain this is Grandpa Harold got Alzheimer's or something. Anyway, while everyone was too busy listening to the old man's ramblings, the Harpy snatched Rose through the window. Triana stays behind while Cheyenne runs after them. For some reason, the Harpy decides to just leave Rose laying on the ground in the middle of the woods. Timothy is the first one to find her, but gets killed by the Harpy, which is surprisingly lore accurate. After that, Cheyenne tries to attack her, but fails. And then, we finally get to the best part, which is, of course, Wellsgood.
It should have been me, not him!
After killing the Harpy, Wellsgood approaches Rose to take her instead. And it is kind of funny how he's just standing still for a couple of seconds. Shovel Knight tries to interrupt him but fails. All of them stand in this pose, preparing to strike at any moment. And you get all excited, anticipating what's gonna happen next. But then the episode ends on this absolute cliffhanger. And what makes this cliffhanger hurt even more is knowing that the story never continued. Now, considering there is only one episode for me to go off of, from the little that we do have, I have to say that I actually enjoyed this. The only bad parts I can point out is the Beyond Dragon mishap, and that one fuck up they had with Rose's backstory. I'm honestly kinda stunned because they managed to include the small details from the story, but somehow managed to completely mess up the most important part. However, other than that, I'm pretty sure this is the best Dragon Nest animation we currently have. Yes, there are other differences with the actual quest, but that would obviously happen since they had to merge several timelines to include multiple playable characters all at once. Which I also must commend, it turned out pretty organically. And unlike the movie, all of the characters actually look like themselves. Every single one of them, down to the enemies. Which you think is the bare minimum with an adaptation, but Warriors Dawn taught me not to take the little things for granted. I'm genuinely so mad that there isn't more of this, so we can only imagine how they tackle including more character stories. From the credits we can also see that they're planning to feature other iconic characters like Eltia, Jasmine, Illusion, and of course, Gerent and Argenta. All of which I would love to see drawn in this art style. Why did Shanda decide to spend money on the Dragon Nest movie when we could have gotten an entire season of this? Why? Why? But Serene, didn't you say there was one more episode of the anime that was made before they completely abandoned the project? Yes, there was. The fabled Ice Dragon episode. And as I've already mentioned, the gap between these two episodes was almost 8 months long. So, considering the first episode was made in only around 2 months, this would mean that the second one would be even better, right? If you just said yes, then you truly have absolutely no idea what we are about to dive into. As I already went over in the first section of this video, this episode covers the story between Iver and Guy. And before we proceed, I will have to quickly defend my pronunciation of his name before anyone has any question. The reason I pronounce it as Guy and not Guay or Guy is because child Guy was named after Iver's brother by the same name. And each known member of Iver's family, including Iver herself, are named after French words relating to winter. And in French, this word is pronounced as
Guy.
So that's how I'm gonna be saying it. Anyway, with this out of the way, let's finally talk about more things relating to this episode. Here's a red flag for you already. After looking over the credits of this, I realized I have no idea which studio was responsible for the animation here. I don't think it was Seven Stone Entertainment, because unlike last time, they weren't listed in the credits, and also for other reasons you're about to see later. The closest thing to an animation company we got is Didi Studio. No, not Didi. Didi. However, I doubt they had the main role to play here, since they mainly specialize in music videos, and in the credits they are listed as video support, just like last time. What's also interesting is the fact that I couldn't find Didi Studio ever mentioning their involvement with this project, or any other company mentioned here besides Shanda for that matter. I wonder why everyone who worked on this wouldn't want this on their resume. Now, as you listen to me recap the events, I want you to keep in mind that this episode follows directly after the one I just finished going over. It might seem redundant that I keep hammering this point over and over again, but that's because you haven't experienced the absolute whiplash of watching these episodes one right after another. The episode starts with Iver's thoughts as she's being dug out of her literal grave by Guy.
给我，钥匙。
好像之前知道，现在却忘记了。
And I do have to say, as a big fan of Mistland, getting to see the first-hand experience of someone turning into a child is actually cool as fuck, not gonna lie. That is why I'm so mad this concept was executed like ass. Also, finding out that Guy was actually the one to dig her out was pretty interesting, since before watching this I thought Iver just crawled out of the ground zombie style. Now that I think about it, if Guy didn't do that, Iver would just be forced to stay underground buried alive until she found a way to dig herself out, which is very Mistland core. After that, we finally get to see the opening to this anime, and this is where Seven Stone's absence is the most obvious. First of all, we get this very janky shot of Saint Haven, with models ripped straight out of the game, and the camera which feels like it's moving a literal Minecraft minecart. But honestly, this isn't even the worst looking part. For this opening, they decided to combine scenes from the first episode with the scenes made specifically for the opening. And it's very, very obvious which ones were in the previous episode. Because this was preceded by this. What the hell happened, bruh? This is again one of those MS Paint anime opening memes, and even they have better animation. Okay, you might say that this is just the opening and no one gives a shit about them anyway. But this isn't the last of the shitty animation we're gonna see today. Oh boy, if anything, this opening is just the appetizers to the full course meal of PNG nest we're about to be served. One more thing before we move on. Take a good look at all the playable characters. I just finished praising the anime for nailing the characters' appearances. So could anyone please tell me what the hell happened to my girl Angelica? Why is she awful now? And what's up with that yee-ass haircut? I guess she gambled away all her money again and couldn't afford to go to the salon, so it grew out to this awkward length. As a sorceress main, I'm very offended by the half-assed representation. Anyway, after getting a good taste of what's about to come, We transition over to Guy's house, which is just a random abandoned property he decided to claim, where he's taking care of Yver, who's getting accustomed to being a child. And yeah, your eyes are not in fact deceiving you. And the animators legit forgot that her eyes are supposed to be yellow now. Not only that, her eyes keep randomly switching colors throughout the entire episode. There's even a moment where for a split second you can see her eyes being blue before quickly switching to yellow. Alright, I need you to just listen to the following string of events, because it's about to get unbelievably goofy. While Guy and Yver are yapping about being childs, someone from the outside randomly shoots an arrow at them. Guy nonchalantly catches it and then just turns it into a rose made from ice.
I'm using my rose toy.
But Yver doesn't really give a shit about the rose because someone literally just tried to shoot her and starts freaking out. But Guy is like, yeah, people be trying to kill us because we're childs. Our life sucks. And bear in mind, while all of this is happening, we're supposed to assume that whoever shot that arrow is just chilling outside. They're not trying to shoot another one or even run away, because Guy goes out to freeze the ass off camera. And I don't know if this was because I was watching this while drunk off a glass of wine, but for some reason seeing Yver have this unchanging blank expression as the room around her freezes absolutely fucking sent me. And then bro just casually walks in like he didn't just ult all over the whole house. The two of them decide to visit the cradle of the abandoned, because that's where Yver's house is. I don't really know what bro expected bringing her here, since childs don't really like seeing anything that can remind them of their past life. Guy starts reminiscing about the time when he was hiding at Yver's family's shed back when she was still human, where apparently she would cook for him every day, but her cooking sucked.
你每天都给我做糖饼吃，只不过那味道。
Bruh, why were you even eating it then? It's not like your child does even needs food. Leave some for the rest of her fam, they're already starving.
I told you, when I'm finished, you can have what's left.
And talking about her fam, it's very strange that Guy never talks about Yver's other family members, especially Grell. Yver's family was killed because Traian came to her house looking for Guy. So after that, Guy felt immense guilt because he feels responsible for causing their deaths. Due to this, it became Guy's duty to not only protect Yver, but her only remaining family member, Grell. But in this anime, bro is just straight up a simp.
OMG, yas girl, slay queen, yas.
Sure, he also kinda is in the game too, but that's because Yver was the only person who offered him kindness, despite him being a child, and also low-key being a tweaker. But instead of caring about Yver's family as much as he cares for her as well, Guy cares about Yver only, so his character has been completely assassinated in this version. Anyway, the two of them run into a handful of random Army of Destruction soldiers. Apparently they recognize Yver back from her human time, but for some reason they get scared by her mere presence and call her a monster. This makes literally zero sense. You're all the same species. Do you run and cry like that too when you look in the mirror? And talking about running, nothing could have prepared me for that goofy ass running animation. These three legit look like they just shat their pants. There is no way these two episodes were animated by the same studio. And you know what the funniest part is? I guess the animators were so embarrassed by the poor job they did, that when this exact scene is used for the opening, it cuts right when the running animation is about to start. Not gonna lie, I'd be embarrassed too.
Are you not embarrassed? This is really embarrassing.
But if you think this is the worst running animation you'll ever see, you're mistaken. No, this is the worst running animation. Let me just say that when I saw this, I can't even remember the last time I laughed so hard in my entire life. My body made noises I had no idea it could even make. This was unintentionally the funniest fucking shit I've ever seen. How the hell did this even make it out of the studio? After our eyes were graced with this absolute clownery of a running animation, Guy uses his cool ice powers to freeze all the childs in place. Meanwhile, Yver uses this moment to snatch their jewels, but for some reason before she even consumes them, she suddenly gets yassified for absolutely no reason. All this time I've been wondering where Yver got her child drift from, and apparently I'm supposed to believe that touching a jewel just changed her clothes and gave her a face full of makeup. In case you just couldn't tell, I don't think that's canon, because in the game, Grell left his old clothes behind when he stole himself the new drip from a random child he killed. He wouldn't have to do that if he could just magically get himself a new fit from the funny jewel. Nonetheless, Guy offers Yver to team up, to which she agrees. After that, they set up the nest in the northern snowfield. This is where the playable characters appear once again, including the ones that weren't in the previous episode. That is why I thought that this was a completely separate series. This feels like we just skipped a whole last season, and not even all the characters are present in this battle. Where are the rest? What happened to them? Also, there's something else I've noticed while editing. For some reason they decided to give Camelina a completely different hairstyle compared to the one she had in the opening. Was drawing braids really that much harder for them? Also, am I seeing things, or are there two Edens running up the stairs? How the hell did that even happen? More importantly though, why are all of them even here to beat the shit out of Guy? In the game, the reason the playable character goes to Guy's nest is not to fight him, but actually to try and save him from Yver. But why would Yver want to harm him? You say if you don't know the actual story besides this anime. Because the one who suffered the biggest character assassination in this episode was not in fact Guy, but Yver herself. If Guy's character was assassinated, then Yver's character is a cartel victim. I could understand her still having the remnants of her old self back when she was still in the beginning stages of her child transformation. But no, she stays passive throughout the whole runtime. Remember how I mentioned Guy was the one inviting her to team up? It was supposed to be the other way around, with Yver controlling the situation. In-game, Yver was the definition of gaslight gatekeep girl boss. She used Guy's desire to make her regain memories of her old self, since he believes that version of her still exists, to manipulate him into trying to lure Grell out to her and kill them both. The player sees through her plans and tries to explain to Guy that he has been played. But Guy, unknowingly similar to Grell, continues to cling to the memory of human Yver, who is already dead. That's why he decides to attack the playable character, because Guy thinks that we came to disturb their peace. The reason we even find his nest is because Guy was the one to leave the map leading to it, which was intended for Grell. But since this anime cut Grell out of the picture, how the hell did the playable cast even find them? But if you thought this entire scene couldn't get any worse, this is the part where Guy transforms into a dragon and it looks hideous. Now, we all hate the CGI in anime, but we all understand why it has to be used sometimes. But when it is used, the animators try their best to make the 3D models blend into the 2D environment as much as possible. Here, an attempt wasn't even made. This shit looks like it was made in late 2000s Miku Miku dance. It legit would have looked better if they just straight up used the model from the actual game. It's not like they're above doing that, so what the hell happened here? But believe me, the dog shit animation doesn't end here. It had only just begun. I'm sorry, did they hire the fucking Blue Lock animators for this? What the hell am I even looking at? There is so little fluid in this animation that it shriveled up and died. This unironically looks like it was made in Microsoft PowerPoint. But it gets even worse the moment Guy starts flying around like someone's fucking Roblox model. And shortly after that sensory overload is finally over, We cut over straight to Guy fucking dying. I'm sorry, but why does bro have blue blood?
What is wrong with you? Why are you blue?
Charles don't have blue blood, and we know this because in chapter 15, Jade's cut is not blue. At first I thought this was done as a censorship measure, but then I remembered that they literally animated a whole ass pool of red blood earlier. So what the hell is up with Guy? Also, what the hell does this shot even mean? Is the entire gang fucking frozen? Are they just fucking dead now? In that case, why did Guy lose? What the hell is even happening anymore? Guy then decides to give his jewel up to Yver, which did not in fact happen in the game. There is literally no reason for him to willingly give it up to her, because since he still has it, he would eventually regenerate and continue to be with Yver like he wanted. So what is even the plan here? Also, we're supposed to believe that this whole area was covered in snow due to Guy's power, which is again not how it was in the game. Also, the snow be looking very soft. Yver leaves after coming up with the most basic goal you could possibly imagine.
生存下去，就是我生命的目的。
And that's it. That's the second and last episode of the Dragon Nest anime. Now I understand why this episode was deleted off YouTube. I thought it was impossible to butcher that much lore in under 10 minutes, but I was proven completely wrong. I feel like this was an experiment by Shanda to see how little money and effort they could possibly spend on an anime adaptation. And judging by the fact that this is their last anime ever, this experiment ended in failure. If it didn't, then we probably would have gotten even more episodes with increasingly worse animation and offensive mischaracterization. I don't even know how it was possible to misinterpret the entire Guy arc that horribly. Did they read the fucking quest with their eyes closed? A 12-year-old would write a better fanfic than that. And before you say, "But Sewin, maybe this happened because they had to fit the story into a 10-minute episode." No, this happened because of a lack of effort and a major skill issue. I won't even entertain the idea that cutting down this arc to 10 minutes and leaving the essence of the major characters was impossible. Because it wasn't. No one just gave a single shit to try. But the lack of effort wasn't only on the writer's part. I'm convinced that there wasn't a single person on the team who cared even a little about making this episode at least decent, especially the animator. Even the infamous 7 deadly frames look leagues better than whatever the hell I witnessed while watching this. It feels like the production budget was around $100, not counting the complimentary pizza from the higher-ups. I wish I knew what the fuck could have possibly happened behind the scenes to cause this, because this just doesn't look normal. Is this actually a cry for help? What the hell could have possibly happened to cause such a drastic downgrade? If this was a fan project, I wouldn't even be making this video right now. You have to keep in mind that this was made by a real studio. No, several studios were involved in the production. How did Shanda even approve the final product? Also, I'm gonna roast the fuck out of some random Chinese blood right now, or I will spare naming. But if you ever feel like you're shit at your job, remember that there is a person credited for quality control in this episode. If this is what we got after the animation was reviewed, I'm frankly afraid to imagine how it looked before that. I now understand why whichever studio was probably forced at gunpoint by Shanda to produce this refused to attach their name to the project, and it's also for the best that I couldn't find anything related when looking up the names of people from the credits. I won't be surprised if they all are actually pseudonyms. This anime is so bad that the article about this episode put more focus on the musical performance than anything else. As if they knew that the only way you could unironically enjoy this anime is if you're actually blind. Before watching this, I heard people in the community saying that this episode is bad, but they never said why it was bad. So I just assumed it was the same case as the movies. But no, the Frost Interlude is a completely different league of dog shit. If the movies at least had the animation carrying them, then the only thing this episode has to show for itself is the two good but low-key forgettable songs. But there is one thing that the Frost Interlude has going for it. It may be bad, but it is hilariously bad. It literally has the same value as a freak show. You watch it to the point and laugh at the ugliest animation you'll ever see. By now, you may have realized that I spent much more time talking about the second episode compared to the first one. But that's because there is much more to say in this case. The Frost Interlude was so horrendous that I think it legit killed any hope for another attempt at an anime adaptation for the entire franchise. Which is kind of a shame, because I could only imagine how goofy Wander would have looked like in that art style. Since this is the last piece of animated Dragon Nest media we have, I would like to end this video on my personal tier list of every Dragon Nest cartoon we have. I thank you for sticking till the end. Until the next time, peace out.